So today I just wanted to tell you my stoma story. So how I got a stoma. So I guess, I just had my sixth kid in 2020, October 2020, and 3 months after I had him, so it was January 2021, I started having blood in my stool, and it wasn't a lot, and I just thought it was probably like from the birth maybe itself, like a internal hemorrhoid or something. um, it wasn't until April that I ended up having a colonoscopy, and at that time I was diagnosed with proctitis, and acute onset from that colonoscopy. I started having immediate bloating, and a bit of a pain right at the ileocecal valve. And I didn't have that before. Then I also got a phone call saying that the proctitis diagnosis wasn't correct, because even though they couldn't see any inflammation farther up through my colon, the biopsies they took showed that my whole colon was inflamed and kind of like in splotches. So yeah, and I believe that there was some damage done to my ileocecal valve with that colonoscopy, and that the bacteria that isn't supposed to pass from your large colon into your small colon, I think that it had been pushed kind of past that valve, and I started to experience SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I think that some bacteria wasn't where it was supposed to be, and I was suffering the bloating from that. Um, I did a lot of online research, and I started just actually self-medicating. I didn't use pharmaceuticals yet at this time, and to be honest, what I was doing was working, sort of like a GAPS diet approach. And but because I had like overhauled my diet, and I had put all these animal fats into my diet, I took the advice of an online doctor, which I just was ignorant, but I started popping a lot of a supplement called betaine HCl, because it helps break down fats. And what I didn't know was that if you have ulcers, it can irritate them, or it can even create ulcers. And I do believe it started a fair bit of irritation in my stomach, unbeknownst to me. So while I was experiencing, um, I think, a fair amount of remedy to my symptoms that I'd had, I kind of had this other situation lurking. And when I thought things were going pretty well, at this time, it was July. Um, we had been given a bottle of organic wine, and I don't even really hardly ever drink alcohol, but I decided to have a half glass with my dinner. And within 3 hours, I was hemorrhaging. I It was like a pitch black tarry stool, and I had determined it was coming from my stomach. And I actually went on, if you look up vitamin U and cabbage juice fasting for ulcers, I decided to do a cabbage juice fast like pretty quickly. So I basically drank cabbage juice for the next couple weeks, but I was just losing. It actually did improve. The black tarry blood actually stopped, and but there was still like some maroon kind of blood going on, which I was from the colon. So both, I think, had bled, and one had stopped and one had kept going. I also actually during that time was put on I think it was about getting close to 2 weeks in, I was put on a proton pump inhibitor, which if there was anything left ulcer-wise in my stomach, that would have helped clear that up. But it didn't take care of the colon. And I was losing blood pretty rapidly, but I was actually doing kind of okay. The problem was by the end of the 2 weeks, my hemoglobin was at 70. I think it's supposed to be over 120 or something. And the thing that scared me the most was I was actually starting to have like respiratory problems. I was really having a hard time breathing. So I got admitted, and I ended up taking blood transfusions, which were recommended, and they did a sigmoidoscopy, and could see that yes, the blood was coming from kind of like some deep ulcerations near to the rectum, and that was kind of the final blood. So they put me on pretty high doses of prednisone, which is a steroid, and it was effective for the inflammation. But what I didn't know was that it was predisposing me by about 75% higher chances while being in hospital to a bacteria called C. difficile, Clostridium difficile, C. diff. And so I came home with now not the bleeding, but I started having like very smelly and crazy diarrhea. And I hadn't had that before like this, but I didn't know. I just figured, since I have some form of IBD, that it was probably just related to that. Anyway, I was doing like blood work and stool samples for my doctors, and they picked it up. So I got a call saying I had C. diff, and they want to put you on vancomycin. Now, I didn't realize that there are actually ways to beat C. diff without antibiotics. And the problem with using the antibiotics is that if they aren't effective and the C. diff comes back, your body will have built up antibiotic resistance, and it will be harder to beat it with the antibiotics the next time. And you can look into FMT, fecal matter transplants, but that's kind of like the next thing you kind of end up having to go to. So I didn't realize you could treat it with high doses of Saccharomyces boulardii. People beat it with other things too, like turmeric and different like turmeric enemas and stuff. But anyways, high doses of Saccharomyces boulardii is actually quite effective and pretty like doable. So not knowing that, I went ahead and took the vancomycin, and it worked immediately. But slowly it started coming back, the symptoms. Once I was done with the round of antibiotics, the symptoms all started coming back. And it was a bit unfortunate because I did get another prescription for like vancomycin to do it again, like twice as long. And then my doctor gave me that, and I was doing a stool sample while I had the script, but for some reason I dropped that stool off, and we never got the results. They never went to my doctor. So my doctor was under the impression that like I never had it again, but he had prescribed the medication twice because of my symptoms. I think he just kind of forgot that part of the story. But anyway, my concern was that my chances of beating it with the vancomycin were actually decreased at this point. So I looked into fecal matter transplants, which are now actually starting to become a thing in Canada, but even just this couple years ago, they were still not accessible. There was I did find somebody who was going to be doing some what's that called? Like testing, where you take people in and you kind of see how they work. That was just starting. I found somebody on Vancouver Island who was going to do that, but it was like a 6-month waiting thing, and I didn't have 6 months. So I went through my naturopath, and I did a whole bunch of stool samples. While I was doing this, I did it on my husband and my son, hoping to use their stool, but we find out they had a Klebsiella infection. Now, Klebsiella, it actually can cause IBD, and it's not something that Western medicine is that familiar with. Like, they're pretty familiar with C. diff, but not with the bacteria Klebsiella. And I found out later that Klebsiella is actually a highly reactive bacteria. So had I known that, I might have been a little bit more careful about how I did things, because I was a bit too gung-ho and not gentle and careful. Like, I didn't realize how crazy my body could respond to things. Anyway, your chances of finding like a fecal matter donor are, they say, between like 1% and 4%. Like, very, very low. Most people have things in their gut. You cannot use fecal matter transplants. Fecal matter transplants are actually very risky. It's kind of somewhat like getting like an organ transplant. Not everybody would say that, but there, you have to have a right match. And and it can be quite dangerous if you, so anyway, I had read these books from this woman, Sky Curtis, who had cured her son using her own fecal matter. He had, cured or healed or whatever, put into remission her own son that had Crohn's or colitis. I think it was colitis. And I had actually read tons of these testimonies for IBD, but definitely for C. diff. So I ended up looking at 2 people that were kind of more distant from me, that had healthy lifestyles, and one of them didn't pass and one of them did. So I ended up finding this person that was, several hours from me. And it was quite a commitment to get the product and apply it and all that. So I started doing that, and it definitely cleared the C. diff up right away. But while I was actually looking for that, I actually also ordered some capsules from Spain, and they came on ice. So I did that simultaneously, and so I did enemas with the local stool, and then I took these caps. Anyways, so I can't even say which exact stool would have been the issue, but I started getting cramping, and honestly just didn't really think much about it because I could kind of manage it, and it went away. And I kept going. Like, you only need 1 or 2 implants to get rid of C. diff, but because I'd read all these testimonies of people using fecal matter for like 6 months, and then basically like never having IBD symptoms for years and years and years again, I just wanted to keep going, because I had made these pretty big investments finding this stuff. And so I kept going, and then the cramps came back, except for when they came back super, they were like the same cramps, but they came back so intensely that I don't even know if they're called cramps. I became like, I've had 6 children naturally, and the pain was just unbelievable. And I ended up needing like 24-hour care for the next month. My friends and my sisters and my mom, my dad was support too, but intimately the women were taking care of me and my kids, and a lot of people gave meals and stuff like that to help out. The thing was I had a stubbornness to using biologics for IBD, and because they say once you get on them, you can't get off them, and they actually cause cancer. They shut off your immune system. So for me, it's like telling my body, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And I think that there is something my body's trying to communicate to me. And I think that if I can listen, then I could learn what triggers my body and I could work with it. So there's also just the way they make the medication doesn't seem clean to me. And it's also a bit of Russian roulette because they're basically shutting off these interleukins in your immune system. And there's different interleukins they can shut off, and they don't really know which one in any particular person's case is kind of the culprit that's acting up. So it's a bit of like a guessing game. I did find out that there is a lab in the States that actually tests for this. So you could actually narrow down what part of your immune system is freaking out, and you could target it with specific biologics. Anyways, that's not like a common practice. And so I guess, my internal specialist was just saying like, this isn't FDA approved, so that's why we don't use it. So there's just not, I guess, enough studies and history and tracking on this stuff that people are investing in using it. So until then, it's kind of a bit of a guessing game. And yeah, you might get cancer using this stuff, but so for me, it's not like a good enough answer. It doesn't seem like a long-term solution, and I'm just a bit stubborn. So I didn't use anything when I was going through this incredible pain, and I used narcotics for the pain, but I didn't want to end up on these biologics now. So maybe there could have been a better ending to the story. But how the story ended was with my bowel perforating within a month. And so it was pretty short-lived from like the beginning of my symptoms in January 2021. And then by January 2022, I had a perforated bowel. And I ended up with a colostomy. And the CAT scan at that time told the doctors they'd have to take out my whole colon and my rectum. And so I signed for that. But when I came out of the surgery, my surgeon, who I really do love, he ended up just taking out my sigmoid and kind of a bit of my left side. And and I think he was a bit surprised by that, actually. So I was told that I'd be able to get a reversal from my stoma, like to get hooked back up within 3 to 6 months. But it's been, it's summer 2023 now, so it's been a year and a half. Anyway, I had a complication from at the time of the surgery. Nobody really knows what happened, and it probably was a few things, but the short of it is that my sinusoidal, so the small little blood vessels in my liver were damaged at the time of the surgery somehow. And I ended up coming out of the surgery with pretty bad ascites. So I looked like I was like 7 months pregnant, and it never went away. And so I went through a lot of testing: ultrasound, color Doppler ultrasound, x-rays, MRI, 2 different, like a liver biopsy, then a transjugular liver biopsy. And that was finally when they were able to take the portal pressure, and they realized the pressure was through the roof, and they got a viable biopsy, and it showed that I had sinusoidal dilation. Anyway, so I had this liver injury, and they had done the paracentesis, or whatever it's called, where they drain the fluid from my abdomen a couple times, and I was on diuretics, and I was kind of told that was going to be just what I had to do to manage the ascites. But I ended up doing lots of green juice fasting and diuretic teas, and a very like kind of low carb diet, because carbohydrates make you retain I think almost 3 times as much fluid. So yeah, I did all these things, and I got off the diuretics, and I can still tell I have pressure um, that kind of builds throughout the day. The fluid kind of builds up a bit through the day. And so I'm still battling that, but it's definitely been manageable. And they want to put a shunt in my liver. And then they say once that's done, then they could reverse my ostomy. They're going to go back, check the portal pressure again, and we'll go from there. If it's improving, maybe I'll just wait this out and see if my liver can regenerate without a shunt. There's no rush on a reversal, but even though I have heard that your chances of success are better the shorter you have an ostomy. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, is trying to heal my liver naturally, and in the next couple months, possibly, or in the spring, they're going to check the pressure again in my liver, and then we will consider or not consider a reversal of the colostomy. So that's kind of my stoma story so far. And I did have like some seemingly unrelated health challenges prior to really prior to me having children, but I'll probably save that for another day. But otherwise, I mean, I definitely never had any health challenges where I felt unwell in my life. And so this was kind of crazy, like to come, after 6 kids while I'm almost 40, it's just when it started. And yeah, it was kind of a wild story. Anyway, so there you go. That's where I'm at in my health journey.